No, Tommy. Now, Frank, you know perfectly well he has to work on his arithmetic before he goes to bed. We are going to work on it together every night until he begins to get passing grades. We agreed on that, Tommy, didn't we? Come on.
Oh, let them alone, Agnes. Let them enjoy themselves for a few minutes.
What do you mean, enjoy? Who do you think this arithmetic is for? It isn't for me. I know how to do fractions. Besides, Tommy's not getting any allowance until he can prove he knows how to handle money. If these lessons are not for his good, what are they for, anyhow? What do you say, Tommy? Don't you want to do your arithmetic?
Yeah.
Well, come on.
And so, headache and all, she went up and drilled the youngster for an hour.
The child doesn't know any better but to accept all this as a matter of fact. To that boy, a grown-up has become a person who lets you down or punishes you.
Wait a minute, Tommy.
No, Tommy.
Tommy senses that his mother uses him as a weapon against his dad.
Now, Frank, you know perfectly well he has to do his arithmetic before he goes to bed. Come on.
And yet she has an ambition to be a good mother.
You can use that ambition.
I know I can. After that stealing episode, she's willing to try almost anything.
How is it going?
Very well, I think. She has begun to go into the relationship with her husband, quite frankly and objectively. Pretty soon, I believe she will start talking about her mother more openly. Understanding the boy will be last. That will be hardest for her.
It should be easier for her to understand his problems when she understands her own. If you can just get her to let up on him, give him some air of his own to breathe, I'm sure we can help him a lot. That hostility won't disappear overnight, but we can do a lot for it. Tommy's really a good boy.
Before the first scream, before the first drop of blood, there is silence. A silence that hides inside bedrooms, behind family portraits, beneath the soft rhythm of a child's heartbeat. That's where the fracture begins. Not with a crime, but with a crack. No one is born a monster. They're built, slowly, quietly, over time. Sometimes it's a father who never came home. Sometimes it's a mother who came home drunk. A locked door, a belt, a nightlight that never stayed on. In childhood, the line between fantasy and reality is fluid. And sometimes, so is the pain. Many serial killers describe their early years, not with chaos, but with unbearable stillness. Loneliness that felt like drowning. Shame they couldn't name. Hurt that never left their bones. They were bullied, ignored, or worse, humiliated. But here's the question no one wants to ask. What happens when a child learns to enjoy their suffering? What if pain, their own or someone else's, becomes the only thing that feels real? We don't like to look that far back. It's easier to focus on what they did. But if we want to understand how monsters are made, we have to start in the shadows of their very first memory. Thousands of children are abused and never hurt anyone. So what else is there? Is it something buried in the brain? A broken gene? A quiet twist in the chemistry of empathy? Let's look deeper, not just into the past, but into the wiring of the mind itself. Not every scar is visible. Some are etched into the folds of the brain, burned in with repetition, neglect, or rage. And inside certain minds, something crucial is missing. Empathy. That quiet pulse that tells us, this person is in pain. Stop. In a predator's mind, that signal is scrambled, or worse, it never even existed. Neuroscientists have scanned the brains of convicted serial offenders. What they find is chilling. Underactivity in the prefrontal cortex, the area that governs impulse control. Abnormalities in the amygdala, where fear and emotional processing live. It's not fiction, it's biology. But brain scans don't kill people. So how do these neurological glitches manifest in real life? Let's talk behavior. These individuals don't just lack empathy. They're often manipulative, charming, almost magnetic. They mimic emotions instead of feeling them. To you, it looks like a smile. To them, it's just strategy. This is why neighbors say he was so normal. Why teachers say she was polite, well-mannered. Because the danger isn't in their actions, not yet. It's in their stillness, their watchfulness, their ability to pretend. But not all who lack empathy become violent. So what flips the switch? What finally moves thought into action? Sometimes it's rejection. Sometimes it's humiliation. And sometimes it's nothing at all. Just a quiet decision in the dark. But when that line is crossed, there's no going back. The next question is the one that haunts families, courts, and survivors alike. Did they know what they were doing? Let's put it like this. Their way of justifying their action is terrifying. In the hush of night, after the blood has dried, how does a serial killer justify the unforgivable? Alone with their thoughts, they often don't see a monster in the mirror at all. Instead, they see someone wronged, someone chosen, or someone operating by a higher law. It's a haunting paradox. Human beings committing inhuman acts, yet somehow reconciling it within their own minds. To understand this, we must step into the twisted moral universe they construct for themselves. By day, he painted his face with cheerful colors as a clown, delighting children at local parties. By night, he hunted and killed in cold blood, burying the victims under his house. The stark contrast was no accident. Many serial offenders lead double lives, partitioning their world into ordinary daylit normalcy and secret midnight carnage. It's as if two minds coexist within one person, one charming, even banal, and the other a predator coiled in darkness. Psychologists see this as a way to resolve cognitive dissonance, the unbearable conflict between being a friendly neighbor and a remorseless killer. In effect, the killer lives with a foot in each world, never allowing the light and dark to meet. This ability to mentally segregate their life is known as compartmentalization. It's a psychological trick that lets them lock away any guilt or doubt about their crimes. They construct at least two distinct selves and two categories of other people: an inner circle, family, friends, neighbors, whom they treat with real warmth, and outsiders whom they designate as prey. One infamous predator's wife once insisted, "The man I knew couldn't ever have hurt anybody." And for her it was true, because in his mind she belonged to the safe, protected circle. To the killer, the atrocities are confined to a separate mental room. He can slaughter a stranger 1 hour and kiss his child goodnight the next, the moral walls between those acts carefully sealed. Even those close to these killers struggle to fathom the chasm between the faces they wear. A neighbor of one mild-mannered man, after learning he had murdered dozens, said in disbelief, "I only knew him as a good neighbor, the best I ever had." Such reactions reveal the power of the mask. The friendly persona is not entirely an act. It is a genuine part of the individual, compartmentalized away from the horror. By day, they truly can be diligent employees, doting parents, even community leaders. The horror is compartmentalized into the shadows, so thoroughly hidden that the people who know them can remain blissfully unaware of the monster lurking within. Within the killer's distorted logic, the murders themselves often become rationalized as something other than evil. A common tactic is dehumanization, mentally stripping away the humanity of their victims. To the killer, those victims might be reduced to mere objects or abstract targets, disposable, insignificant. By convincing himself that his prey are less than human, he can murder without ever calling it murder in his own mind. In fact, some convince themselves they are doing a necessary duty. They tell themselves they are ridding the world of filth and evil, as if each kill were a form of cleansing, not a crime. In this perverse moral calculus, the serial killer becomes a self-appointed judge and executioner, believing that his actions, however heinous, serve a larger purpose that justifies the bloodshed. Some even elevate themselves above conventional morality altogether. One captured murderer scoffed at society's laws, bragging that he was beyond good and evil and had no use for society's moralistic dogma. In his eyes, right and wrong were meaningless labels invented by others. All that mattered was his will. This chilling mindset, I am special, I answer to no law, frees the serial offender from the burden of guilt. If he truly believes the rules don't apply to him, then killing carries no moral weight. He writes his own scripture of right and wrong, one that perversely permits or even glorifies his crimes. Empathy is eradicated. Remorse never finds purchase in such a barren moral landscape. In other cases, the killer concocts elaborate delusions or supernatural excuses to rationalize what they've done. One notorious son of a city claimed that a demon, speaking through his neighbor's dog, commanded him to kill. By casting himself as an unwilling servant of dark forces, he shrugged off personal responsibility. It wasn't him, it was the demon. Another predator spoke of an undefined factor X that drove him to murder, saying he was no more responsible for his urge to kill than a snake is for its venom. In his mind, he was a natural-born predator, destined to slay. These self-deceptions and quasi-delusions allow the killer to dissociate from any shred of guilt. They view themselves as instruments of fate or playthings of an alter ego, rather than conscious perpetrators of evil. It is a final twist of the knife. They not only destroy lives, but also deny responsibility, cocooning themselves in a narrative that absolves them. Through all these mental gymnastics, compartmentalization, dehumanization, grandiose self-justification, even delusional thinking, serial killers manage to inhabit a chilling moral universe of their own making. Within that universe, their darkest deeds appear necessary, inevitable, or even right to them. The ordinary human checks of empathy and guilt have been quietly disarmed, allowing cold-blooded violence to continue unchecked. Yet one question remains. Long before the first drop of blood was spilled, were there cracks visible in this facade? What are the early signs of the red flags hidden in childhood and youth that hint at the making of a serial murderer before the mask of normalcy fully forms? They rarely act out of impulse. Beneath the chaos of violence lies a chilling precision, a ritual honed over time. The public sees a senseless spree, but to the one who carries it out, each move fits a logic known only to them. It often begins with fantasy, a thought vague at first, then detailed, until it becomes a script, a loop, a scene played over and over in the mind. Some describe it like a dream they keep falling into, others like a hunger they can't name. And then, eventually, inevitably, they act. But not randomly. Serial killers are often methodical. They choose specific types of victims, specific times, specific places. Patterns begin to form. A particular road, a particular look, a particular ritual after the fact. Some leave things behind. Some take things with them. A lock of hair, an earring, a photograph. To us, they seem like souvenirs. To them, they are trophies, symbols, proof that the fantasy really happened. This is where profiling begins. Investigators look for these signatures, not just the how, but the why beneath it. Did they linger at the scene? Did they return later? Did they stage the body? Cover the face? Every detail becomes a whisper from the unconscious. And slowly, a psychological portrait begins to emerge. But profiling isn't magic. It's educated guesswork. And sometimes, it's dead wrong. Some killers mimic others to throw police off. Some change their methods entirely. And a few, the most elusive, leave no pattern at all. Which raises a darker question. What happens when someone learns how to hide their pattern by becoming someone else entirely? Let's look at the ones who wear a mask, not just in the act, but in life. He smiles at the neighbor, mows the lawn, picks up groceries. Maybe he coaches Little League, or works in IT, or makes a perfect cup of coffee for his wife every morning. On paper, he's nobody special. And that's exactly the point. One of the most disturbing aspects of certain serial killers is just how ordinary they appear. No bloodshot eyes, no wild gestures, no cartoon villain monologues. Just a man or woman blending in, wearing what psychologists call the mask of sanity. This isn't a disguise thrown on at random. It's a carefully engineered facade, a social camouflage built from years of study, watching how people laugh, how they mourn, how they pretend. Behind it is a mind that's not just deceptive, but adaptable. Some learn empathy by copying others. They mirror emotions, say the right thing, cry at the funeral, not because they feel it, but because they know it's expected. And the performance? Convincing. Think of Dennis Rader, the so-called BTK killer, church council president, cub, scout dad. He even wrote poems. But beneath the surface, he was scripting his crimes like a director preparing for a film. It's not just about hiding. It's about controlling the narrative, creating the version of themselves that disarms suspicion. A mask so well worn, even they forget it's not their face. But here's the question. If someone is capable of performing empathy, does that mean they're capable of feeling it? Or is the performance itself the only thing keeping them from falling apart? To find out, we have to look deeper, past the mask, past the crimes, into the cracks of the self. Let's talk about dissociation, about identity fragmentation, about how some don't just pretend to be someone else. They become them. Sometimes the body moves before the mind understands. A hand reaches for the door. A voice speaks calmly to a terrified victim. A scream echoes through a room, and the one responsible feels like an observer, not a participant. This is dissociation, a psychological escape hatch, often rooted in trauma, where the brain severs awareness from reality. For some, it's momentary. For others, it becomes a second skin. In certain serial offenders, this detachment from self isn't a glitch. It's a feature, a way to commit atrocities without emotional consequence. The act becomes something that happened, not something they did. And it doesn't always feel like a loss of control. Sometimes it feels like too much control, as if another version of them emerges in moments of violence. A colder, cleaner self, one with no remorse. We've seen this in interviews, in diaries, in courtrooms. They speak of the other one, the shadow, the monster, the part of them that only comes alive in the dark. But here's where it gets more unnerving. What if that second self isn't an escape from guilt, but a container for it? A space to pour all the urges, the rage, the fantasies, until that container bursts? And if a person can split themselves in two, who's responsible for what comes next? This fragmentation of identity isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. A slow erosion of boundaries between self and story, between memory and imagination, which leads to a question most forensic psychologists have wrestled with. Is the killer always present? Or do they become someone else in order to kill? To answer that, we have to go back to the first time they crossed the line, back to the first time they told themselves, this isn't wrong, it's necessary. Next, the first kill, and the transformation that follows. It's a point of no return, but it rarely looks like one at the time. The first kill is often chaotic, messy, and clumsy, not the calculated execution we imagine from films. There's panic, mistakes, and sometimes even hesitation. And yet, for many serial offenders, that moment, however imperfect, becomes the most vivid memory of their life. Why? Because it's not just about the victim, it's about them, about who they become in that moment. For some, it feels like stepping into power for the first time. For others, it feels like unlocking something ancient and unspeakable inside them. But almost always, it's followed by one emotion: relief, not remorse, not horror, but a terrifying sense of alignment, as if the act resolved an internal conflict they never had words for. This is where psychology diverges from morality, because to understand them, we have to see what they saw in that moment. A quiet, a release, a surge of control. And then comes the second most important moment. What happens after? Some can't sleep, some vomit, some return to the scene obsessively, replaying it in their mind, and some, chillingly, go about their day. Coffee, work, small talk, because the performance of normalcy was never hard for them. It was always a mask, but underneath it, something has changed. The line has been crossed, the fantasy has become real, and the body now knows what the mind once only imagined. And here's the unsettling part. Once that boundary is broken, it's easier to cross again. And again. The first kill doesn't satisfy. It wakes up an appetite. But why do some stop, while others spiral? To understand that, we need to enter a different realm, one not found in case files but in cycles, the ritual, and the compulsion to repeat. For years, they live among us. At work, they smile. At the store, they blend in. They hold conversations, shake hands, even raise families. But behind the social performance is a face few have ever truly seen, and one the person wearing it can barely hold together. The double life is a performance of control, a balancing act between chaos and camouflage. But even the most disciplined mind has limits, and eventually something shifts. Sometimes it's subtle. A missed appointment, a strange reaction, a moment of overconfidence. Other times, it's explosive, an escalation so abrupt that everyone finally sees what was there all along. But what actually causes the mask to crack? It's rarely just one thing. Stress, exposure, narcissistic injury. These can all fracture the illusion. But the most common factor is compulsion. Because over time, the internal hunger outpaces the ability to hide it. The mask was never about protection. It was about control. And when control begins to slip, so does everything else. We've seen it before. Ted Bundy, unable to stop himself during the height of his manhunt. BTK, reaching out to the media after years of silence, needing to feel seen again. And so many others who thought they were being clever, but were really just unraveling. But when the unraveling begins, a different kind of fear takes over. Not the fear of being caught, but the fear of being forgotten. Some begin leaving messages. Others escalate their violence. A few even insert themselves into investigations. Because if the performance is over, they want the final act to be unforgettable. So the question becomes, what do you see when the mask finally falls? A monster? A tragedy? Or a mirror held up to the darkest corners of human nature? As we close, let's ask one final, haunting question. Can anyone truly spot them before the first mask is ever worn? Or is the performance always convincing until it's too late?